The ship docked in complete silence. No alarms, no transmissions, no triumphant chorus of trombones, which was the usual protocol for returning war vessels, especially when they came back early. The Verity's Fang, a state-of-the-art recon cruiser designed for long-term planetary observation and extremely judgmental scanning, simply parked, like someone trying to sneak into a theater halfway through the movie without paying. Dockmaster Hruval was the first to notice, mostly because the ship had parked itself diagonally across 4 docking lanes, which was not just against interstellar regulations, it was rude. "Who the blazes is piloting that thing?" he muttered, adjusting his monocular, which he wore despite having perfect vision, because it made him look like someone who should be in charge of things. Then the airlock opened, and everything went wrong. Out stepped a single figure, alone. No crew, no entourage, no greeting party. Just a man. Technically alien, but still very much a man, in the way that made people instinctively feel like they should offer him a towel and ask if he needed a sandwich. This was Sergeant Glan Tokmail, last seen leading a squad of 12 elite operatives on a classified mission to a planet so statistically insignificant it was designated simply as Earth, a Class 7.1A habitation sphere, known primarily for high carbon emissions, aggressive lawn care culture, and reality shows involving cake. But now, Glan was back. His armor was gone, his boots were gone. He was wearing what appeared to be jean shorts. His chest was smeared in something orange and suspiciously cheese-scented, and clutched tightly in his left hand was a yellow rubber duck. The duck had seen things. The medical team rushed forward. Glan didn't resist. He just stared forward, wide-eyed, like a man who had witnessed a god fall over trying to tie its sandals. They scanned him. No injuries, no physical damage. Just profound psychological compression, which is a fancy way of saying his brain had decided to curl into a tiny ball and scream internally for a while. The interrogation began immediately. "Sergeant Tokmail," the High Analyst barked. "You are ordered to provide a full report on your mission to Earth." Glan blinked once, slowly. Then he shook his head. "No." "No? What do you mean, no?" screamed the analyst, already on his 5th cup of hypercaf and dangerously close to a diplomatic aneurysm. "I mean no," Glan replied, voice quiet but firm. "I'm not talking about it." A ripple passed through the assembled observers. There were gasps. Someone fainted. A junior intern vomited into a ceremonial helmet. He had refused. That had never happened before. Even agents from the war nebulas, after being flayed alive by sentient bureaucracy, had at least tried to offer a debrief. But Glan, he just sat there, still holding the duck. They brought in psych specialists from 3 separate galaxies. They offered him amnesia reversal, brain-massaging jellyfish, even coupons for half-off trauma therapy at the Spa Nebulon. Still, Glan said nothing. One therapist, a particularly optimistic pile of mist named Dr. Grilborp, tried to establish rapport through art therapy. Glan drew a circle, colored it violently red, and labeled it human energy. When asked to elaborate, he ate the crayon. Eventually they tried to extract information from the duck. It squeaked. Once. That was enough to cause a military-grade admiral to lose control of his bladder. The Council declared Earth temporarily inadvisable for further contact, which is political language for nope, nah, shut it down. And so Glan was given quarters, a quiet room, clean sheets, 3 meals a day, and his duck. Every now and then someone would knock. Ready to talk yet? No. The universe wanted to know. What did he see? What happened to the other 11? Why the duck? But Glan just stared ahead, sometimes blinking, sometimes not. The silence grew louder, and the duck kept squeaking. Theories began to multiply like bacteria in a forgotten sandwich. The fact that Sergeant Glan Tokmail wouldn't talk didn't just bother the Galactic Council, it haunted them, especially because he looked perfectly healthy. Mentally unwell, sure, but deliberately mentally unwell, like someone who had stared too long into the abyss and decided to redecorate it. The duck didn't help. It was small, yellow, and possessed of a squeaker so shrill it violated several local noise ordinances just by existing. But the real issue wasn't the duck itself. It was how Glan treated it. He carried it everywhere. He stared at it for long stretches of time. He once saluted it. The council began to suspect the duck was either a symbol, a weapon, or, possibly, a hostage. They ran scans. The duck was completely non-sentient. That only made things worse. Dr. Vroondilax, lead behavioral analyst from the Institute of Cognitive Wobbliness, presented her findings in front of a full chamber. "We're dealing with a case of extreme psychological trauma," she explained. "Symptoms suggest exposure to something deeply irrational, possibly culturally recursive." "Culturally recursive," barked Admiral Grince, who didn't understand half the words but compensated by shouting. "Yes. Imagine trying to make sense of a species that builds musical instruments out of glass bottles, worships rectangles of processed potato, and voluntarily injects fermented fruit into pickled vegetables for recreational purposes." The room went silent. "Humans," she clarified unnecessarily. Theories began flooding in. Some were relatively grounded: psychosocial destabilization, neuroempathic overload, dietary poisoning via earth condiments. Others were less so. One widely circulated theory, pushed aggressively by the media conglomerate Galactic Truthish, claimed that Glan had encountered an ancient Terran entity known only as Florida Man. This being, according to legend, wielded chaos like a blunt instrument, and had once bitten an alligator because it looked at him funny. The theory was dismissed due to lack of evidence, and also because it made several senior analysts weep uncontrollably. Meanwhile, politicians demanded answers. "If the humans are dangerous," thundered Chancellor Quorb, "we must take preemptive action." "Based on what?" snapped Ambassador Tilnix. "A duck and a pair of shorts." "Exactly." Diplomatic ties with Earth, which were already dangling by a thread, after a misunderstanding involving karaoke and a UN interpreter's regrettable rendition of Bohemian Rhapsody, were officially put under review. Earth, of course, had no idea any of this was happening. The planet continued on, blissfully unaware that a traumatized alien holding a bath toy was the sole reason it hadn't been visited by extra-dimensional life ever again. To make matters worse, a group of independent scholars formed a think tank called Project Quacklight. Their job was to determine whether the duck was a cipher, a code, a key. They stared at it for weeks, hoping for a sign. It squeaked once. One of the interns fainted. The duck, unknowing and uncaring, became a cultural phenomenon. Songs were written, documentaries aired. A fashion brand on Keltraxis Prime released an entire summer line inspired by Earth core trauma aesthetic, featuring cut-off jean shorts, blank stares, and tiny rubber duck necklaces. Through it all, Glan remained silent. His expression didn't change. He ate his meals quietly. He sometimes whistled an unsettling tune none of the analysts could identify, though it bore strong resemblance to a jingle from a fast food chain believed extinct since 2037. One day, a linguist named Vel Rotar tried something radical. She approached Glan with a tray of various objects: a slice of pizza, a bottle of soda, a glitter-covered cowboy hat, and a photo of a woman screaming at a cat. Glan stared at them. His eye twitched. He reached forward and gently took the glitter hat. Then he placed it atop the duck. That was the closest thing to a breakthrough anyone ever got. Vel Rotar retired the next day and moved to a quiet moon with no atmosphere, claiming she needed space. Back in the council chamber, the conversation took a sharp turn. "If he won't talk," muttered High Councillor Nendril, "perhaps we should send someone else." The room froze. Another mission, another team, another potential duck. But curiosity is a vicious thing. It chews at logic, gnaws on fear, and eventually swallows common sense whole. and someone somewhere was always willing to poke the unknown with a stick, especially if that stick came with hazard pay. And Earth was still there, waiting, 3 weeks earlier, on a planet that had the audacity to call itself Earth, and even more audacity to exist exactly where it shouldn't, a ship uncloaked over a patch of what locals called the Deep South. No one noticed. This was partly due to the camouflage system, but mostly because it was a Sunday, and there was a regional chili cook-off. The landing was soft, the kind of soft that makes other landings feel insecure about their own noisiness. The ship settled quietly into a wooded area behind a large field where humans had gathered to perform a bizarre ritual involving music, meat, and arguing over gas grills. Inside the ship, Sergeant Glarn Tokmail stood tall, if slightly twitchy. His squad of 12 elite reconnaissance operatives, codenamed Unit Viridian, were prepped and ready. These were the best of the best, trained in stealth, diplomacy, non-lethal observation, and the subtle art of not being noticed while hiding behind potted plants. Their mission was simple: observe, record, and extract. No contact, no interaction, no participation in what one analyst had called primitive, flesh-based celebrations of heat and seasoning. Of course, that was the plan. Within 6 minutes of deployment, the plan was dead. Corporal Nibs Yolik, genius, linguist, emotional liability, had wandered too close to a grill and accidentally complimented the barbecue rub. He was immediately absorbed into the nearest family unit, handed a folding chair, and given a paper plate full of smoked meats and suspiciously glowing corn. "Well, I'll be," shouted a sunburned man in a hat that read, "Beef is my spirit animal." "You boys sure went all out with them alien costumes." Nibs opened his mouth to object. A baked bean was shoved in. The squad's camo suits, which were supposed to mimic natural backgrounds, had, thanks to an unfortunate translation glitch, taken on the appearance of early 90s rave attire: fluorescent pinks, electric greens. At least one operative was covered in blinking LED smiley faces. To the humans, they looked like hired entertainers. To the operatives, they looked like a mistake. Glarn tried to re-establish control. He issued silent commands, activated emergency extraction protocols, and even screamed internally in 6 different dialects. But no one responded. Because Sergeant Jarnack was now in a line for hot dogs, 2 scouts were playing horseshoes with someone named Earl, and Medic Velin had, under circumstances no one fully understood, volunteered to judge a pie contest. Every attempt to extract the team resulted in further entrenchment. The locals were friendly, in that aggressively hospitable way that made saying no feel like a war crime. Beers were handed out, jokes were made. A man named Carl slapped an operative on the back so hard it triggered their emergency medical system. They tried to leave. They failed. Someone had blocked their ship with a lifted pickup truck that had a mural of a flaming eagle punching the moon. By sundown, Unit Viridian was split across 5 different human gatherings. Specialist Vor ended up in a garage converted into a man cave, watching a sport that involved shouting at helmets. Technician Drex was trapped on a pontoon boat, learning to fish with dynamite. Private Zerl, the strongest among them, was last seen trying to explain interstellar physics to a drunk woman named Mandy, who insisted she had seen aliens once in a waffle shop, and also that Glarn had nice calves. It wasn't a battle. It was assimilation by potato salad. And through it all, Glarn watched, horrified, helpless. At some point, a toddler threw a balloon at him and called him Funny Bugman. He didn't react. His translator was fried, his comms were jammed, his boots had melted slightly due to proximity to something called Cajun lava wings. He sat down, and the duck happened. No one sure where it came from. 1 second he was scanning local signals. The next, a small human child thrust a rubber duck into his hands, grinned, and ran off yelling something about, "You need him more than me." The duck squeaked. Glarn stared at it. He didn't know why, but the squeak echoed somewhere deep inside his soul, like a door creaking open in a part of his brain labeled "Do not enter without sanity clearance." He stood there, surrounded by laughter, grease, country music, and the smell of sunblock and destiny. And somewhere, not far off, someone yelled, "Y'all, who wants to do shots off the UFO guy?" The sun was setting in that dramatic, golden-orange way Earth insisted on doing without any special effects budget. To Glarn, it looked like the sky was catching fire, and frankly, that would have been less alarming than what was actually happening. Corporal Nibs was now shirtless and singing something called "Sweet Home Alabama" into a karaoke machine, powered by a generator made out of beer cans and raw defiance. His backup dancer was Sergeant Jarnac, who was deeply committed to the choreography, which appeared to involve a lot of hip thrusting and finger guns. Private Zerl, the squad's most dangerous hand-to-hand combatant, had entered a jalapeno eating contest. She had already consumed 6 and was refusing water with a face that said, "I could crush your lungs, but right now I need to prove dominance through capsaicin." 2 other operatives were trying to play cornhole, a game whose purpose Glarn couldn't comprehend, despite it involving literal bags of corn. Each time they missed the hole, a nearby human named Kenny would yell, "Drink!" and they would obey, out of confusion mostly. Glarn had tried, desperately, to intervene. "Squad!" he barked, waving his hands in the universal military gesture for stop partying and start panicking. No one listened. Specialist Vore offered him a sausage on a stick. It was delicious. That made it worse. "This is a reconnaissance mission," he shouted, though it came out garbled due to a mouthful of sauce. "We're supposed to be observing." "We are!" yelled Vore. "Observing how they marinate." A small child squirted Glarn with a water gun filled with some syrupy red substance called Fruit Punch Blast Extreme. It smelled like liquid rage and artificial watermelon. Glarn didn't flinch. He simply stood there, dripping, clutching the duck. He had stopped trying to give it back. He had tried 3 times already, and each time the child would shake their head solemnly and whisper, "It chose you." At 8:47 p.m., everything truly went off the rails. A human named Stacy announced that it was time for the ultimate American gladiator backyard showdown. Several vehicles were repositioned to form a makeshift arena. Glarn didn't know the rules, but they involved pool noodles, inflatable dinosaur costumes, and a trampoline someone had borrowed from a neighbor who may or may not have been conscious. Sergeant Jarnac was roped into the first round. He was given a plastic sword, a bucket helmet, and instructions to try not to cry this time. Glarn stared as his soldier, his elite, decorated, top-of-the-class soldier, was launched off the trampoline by a man named Bubba, who screamed "Freedom" as he tackled him mid-air. Jarnac landed in a kiddie pool filled with cheese balls. "Why are they like this?" Glarn muttered to himself, half hysterical, half curious. "What is the objective?" There was no answer, just more noise, more chaos, more beer-fueled interpretive dancing. Then came the moment that truly broke reality. A group of teenagers arrived carrying what they claimed was the greatest invention in backyard physics. It was a slip and slide attached to a leaf blower and powered by what one of them described as liquid courage and duct tape. Against his better judgment, or perhaps because he no longer had any, Glarn watched as the device was launched. A human flew across the yard, screaming with joy, landed in a trash can, and emerged triumphantly holding a raccoon that no one remembered owning. The humans applauded. The raccoon seemed fine with it. Glarn sat down on a cooler. Someone handed him a s'more. He didn't even ask what it was. He bit into it. It was perfect. For a brief second, he forgot where he was. He forgot the mission. He forgot the ship, the council, the reports, the laws of physics, and his own reflection. Then someone shouted, "Taco Bell Run! Who's coming?" Half the squad cheered. One operative yelled, "I'm driving!" They didn't know how to drive. The vehicle they stole was a lime green truck that played Baby Got Back when it turned left. Glan didn't move. He just sat there. The duck squeaked in his lap. He looked down at it, and for the first time he whispered softly, "What do you know that I don't?" The duck did not respond, but it felt like it did. At 9:32 p.m., the mission was officially unsalvageable. Private Zerl returned from the jalapeno contest not victorious, but victorious adjacent, having scared off the reigning champion by calmly stating, "Pain is the sound of progress." Her tongue was glowing. No one asked why. Sergeant Jarnak, still damp with cheese dust, was now being carried around on the shoulders of several men in tank tops who had declared him king of the cookout. He had accepted the crown, which was a still-warm burger bun, and given a speech about the unity of species that included the phrase, "And another thing, y'all got excellent pickles." Technician Drex was found in a hammock debating cryptocurrency with someone who thought the moon landing was fake but believed in Bigfoot's TikTok. Glarn stood behind a shed, running scenarios through his wrist interface. Each simulation ended with his squad either vanishing into suburbia or being legally adopted by the Henderson family. He had never been this close to complete cultural absorption. It was worse than any infiltration mission. There were no enemy weapons, no traps, no radiation storms, just hot dogs, strange music, and a social gravitational pull strong enough to warp discipline itself. And then came the game. Bingo. It started innocently. A few tables were set up, cards handed out, chips distributed. A woman named Barb took a folding chair, placed it next to Glan, and with all the gravity of a star collapsing into itself said, "You'll want to sit down for this, sugar. This round's for pie." Something in Glan's brain clicked. He sat. The numbers began, B1, I-22, G-54. He felt drawn in. There was a rhythm, a danger. Every time Barb muttered, "I just need 067, it sent a shiver down his spine. The room, if you could call a tarp-covered porch with fairy lights a room, was filled with tension thicker than neutron soup. A woman shouted, "Bingo!" Chaos erupted. Accusations flew. Cards were examined. Words like "cheater" and "I'll see you at church, Gladys" rang out. Someone threw a folding chair, but missed and hit a tray of deviled eggs. Glan stood slowly, duck in hand, and walked away. He wandered behind the garage, where the real madness awaited. It was the karaoke round. He found Specialist Vore on stage, belting out "Livin' on a Prayer" with the desperation of someone who didn't know the lyrics but refused to lose momentum. His translator was lagging by 3 seconds, making the song sound like it was being attacked by lag demons. The crowd loved it. One man wept openly. Private Zerl was next, her chosen song, "Wrecking Ball." Her rendition involved literal destruction. Half the porch had collapsed by the time she finished, and someone from the crowd yelled, "She's got feelings, damn it!" Glarn backed away slowly. His boots crunched over plastic cups, glow sticks, and one inexplicable croquet mallet. He turned a corner and ran straight into Dale. Dale was not a warrior. He was not a diplomat. He was not even particularly hygienic. But Dale had presence. A grizzled, sunburned man with a beard that may have been sentient. Dale was the local Waffle House night shift manager. He had the energy of someone who had once fought an opossum for control of a grill and won through eye contact alone. "Y'all from up north?" Dale asked, squinting. Glarn blinked. "Further," Dale nodded. "You look like you've seen some things." "I've witnessed events that contradict natural law." "Been to Memphis?" "No." "Same difference." They stood in silence. Dale lit a cigarette, offered one to Glan. Glan took it, didn't light it, just held it. "It's the people," Dale said, staring into the night like it owed him money. "You come here thinking we're all dumb, but then you stay just long enough to realize we are, but in a way that's incredibly hard to resist." "I've noticed," Glan muttered. Dale looked down at the duck. "That your emotional support poultry?" "I don't know anymore." Dale nodded solemnly. "That's fair." Somewhere in the distance someone shouted, "There's a possum in the cooler again." followed by a cheer. Glan didn't react. He felt it, somewhere deep in his xenobones. The line had been crossed. The moment had passed. He couldn't pull the squad out anymore, not because it was too late, but because they wouldn't leave. They had made peace with the madness, and worse, they were enjoying it. He turned back toward the field. The inflatable dinosaur was back. This time, it had backup. The night reached a point where time stopped behaving properly. Glan no longer knew if it was 11 p.m. or next Thursday. Somewhere along the way, someone had introduced a fog machine, someone else had built a dance floor out of cardboard and shattered expectations, and the moon had started pulsing in rhythm with Cotton Eye Joe. At 12:03 a.m., Sergeant Jarnac attempted to stage a formal extraction. His method involved clapping twice and yelling, "Okay, everybody in the ship," which only prompted a group of humans to interpret it as a cue for a conga line. He was swallowed whole by the dance. Technician Drex had fused emotionally with a lawn chair and was now giving life advice to a tiki torch. It seemed mutual. The torch flickered approvingly whenever Drex made a particularly poignant observation. Specialist Vore had gone completely native. He was wearing jorts, not disguised as jorts. Real, authentic, lived-in jorts. His translator had shut down after being exposed to too many regional dialects and had defaulted to Southern enthusiasm mode. Glan, barely functioning, stumbled toward the extraction beacon he'd placed earlier under the trampoline. It was gone, replaced by a cooler filled with novelty gelatin shots and a sleeping raccoon wearing sunglasses. The beacon wasn't just missing, it had integrated. Desperation set in. He activated the emergency fallback plan. Protocol Dusk Shade 4. Temporary fallback shelter in case of contact breakdown and widespread irrationality. It directed him to the closest neutral location, a Waffle House. He didn't walk. He staggered, the duck tucked in the crook of his arm, silent, watching, possibly judging, maybe just planning its next squeak. The Waffle House was glowing faintly in the distance like a greasy beacon of hope and cholesterol. Inside, the smell of fried comfort and poor decisions was so thick it had its own gravity. Glan entered. Everything stopped. 4 patrons stared at him. A woman in a NASCAR jacket paused mid-pour of syrup. A teenager wearing pajama pants and nihilism looked up from his pancakes. A man with a tattoo of a flaming taco just said, "Huh?" Behind the counter stood Dale. He looked up, nodded once. "You made it." "I need clarity," Glan said, his voice cracking like a poorly tuned accordion. "You need hash browns, scattered, smothered and covered." "I don't know what that means." "You will." Glan sat. The duck sat beside him. The meal arrived in moments, hot and heavy and completely incomprehensible. Glan stared at it. It stared back. A single greasy tear slid down his cheek as he realized this was peace. But it didn't last. The door slammed open. A group of humans burst in, carrying what looked like a karaoke machine, a deflated, inflatable sumo suit, and one of his own operatives, Private Zerl, wrapped in caution tape, screaming, "I regret nothing." The battle had come to the Waffle House. Dale didn't flinch. He simply turned and said, "Glan, it's time." "For what?" "A conversation." The room silenced. Dale leaned in. "There's a line, son. Every creature in the universe gets tested eventually. Some are tested by war, some by love. You grew by karaoke and chili dogs, and what you gotta ask yourself is, did you survive or did you become?" Glan blinked. He looked around. Jarnac was leading a spontaneous group rendition of Bohemian Rhapsody. Vore was trying to explain crop circles using syrup packets. Drex had made a friend out of the jukebox. The line wasn't just crossed, it was doing cartwheels. He stood, activated his recall beacon, the backup beacon, surgically implanted behind his left kidney for emergencies only. It beeped once. High above Earth, the extraction ship received the signal. Protocol, Shadow Fade 1, abandon mission, retrieve surviving asset. A beam of light burst through the roof of the Waffle House. Glan ascended. The duck came with him. Everyone else stayed. They chose to. The humans cheered as he vanished. "Y'all come back any time," someone yelled. Back aboard the ship, Glan collapsed to his knees, covered in glitter, smelling of maple syrup and deep personal compromise. He dropped the duck. It squeaked, and he laughed, the first real laugh in hours. Then he stared ahead, eyes wide, mouth tight, and said nothing. The silence aboard the extraction vessel was so complete it felt intentional, like even the walls were trying not to make eye contact. The automated systems dimmed the lights to something between gentle night mode and emotional numbness. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and resignation. Glan didn't move. The med drone floated nearby, unsure whether to offer painkillers, therapy, or a biscuit. He refused all three. They put him through every standard decontamination and psychological recovery procedure. He passed each one, physically intact, vitals stable, no parasites, no foreign agents, except for a faint, persistent whiff of charred meat and aerosol cheese. The duck remained with him. It had somehow made it through all scans, decontamination fields, and security protocols without setting off a single alarm. One junior technician attempted to confiscate it and immediately burst into tears for no reason at all. After that, they just stopped trying. Back at command, the high-ranking officials gathered with a nervous energy usually reserved for bomb disposal and first dates. The footage had been reviewed, the ship logs dissected, the recovery logs analyzed, and none of it made any sense. There was no battle, no obvious trauma, no signs of resistance, just exposure to Earth. They sat Glan down in the interrogation theater, which was less a room and more an aggressively lit cube with excellent acoustics and terrible vibes. 3 analysts, 2 psychologists, and 1 lawyer who didn't know why she was there, watched from behind mirrored glass. Glan sat. The duck sat on the table in front of him. "Sergeant," said Chief Analyst Dreb, voice carefully calm. "We'd like to ask you a few questions." Glan blinked once. "What happened on the surface?" "Nothing." "Where is the rest of your squad?" Silence. "Are they alive?" A pause, a tiny flinch, but no answer. The duck squeaked, entirely on its own. Chief Analyst Dreb recoiled slightly. "Sergeant, this is a formal debriefing. We need your cooperation." Still nothing. Dr. Hallin, the lead psycholinguist, tried a gentler approach. "Glan, were you harmed?" Glan tilted his head slightly, then slowly reached out and turned the duck to face the wall. "I see," she said, not seeing at all. Hours passed. Specialists tried empathy. Others tried aggression. One attempted interpretive dance, which was both strange and surprisingly moving, but ultimately ineffective. Every time Glan opened his mouth, they leaned forward, and every time he just exhaled. Eventually the council gave up. Officially, on paper, Glan was listed as recovered but uncooperative. His mission file was sealed. Earth was reclassified as a high-risk psychological hazard with a recommendation of zero contact until further notice. Unofficially, rumors spread like wildfire on caffeine. Some said Glan had joined a cult while planetside. Others claimed the duck was a cursed artifact from a long-lost Terran religion known as mall gift shops. One popular theory suggested he had been forced to participate in a reality show and emerged with what ancient humans once called second-hand embarrassment trauma. But Glan didn't care. He was given private quarters, no duties, no assignments, just time. The duck stayed by his side. Sometimes he would sit for hours, staring at the stars. Not thoughtfully, not dramatically, just quietly, like someone trying to forget what salsa dancing with a grandmother felt like while people chanted, "Chug, chug, chug." Then one day, someone tried again. A junior officer. Curious, brave, possibly stupid. "Sergeant Tokmail," they said. "I read the mission log. Can you tell me one thing?" Glan looked up. "Anything. Just one piece of advice. About Earth. About humans." There was a pause, a long one. Then Glan spoke, just 2 words, softly, like a warning from beneath the sea. "Pack snacks." The officer blinked. "That's it?" Glan nodded, then added, "And never accept a challenge from someone named Big Dave." The officer started to laugh, then stopped, because Glan wasn't laughing, and neither was the duck. The report was buried. Officially, Earth was listed as culturally hazardous and marked with a yellow flag, which in intergalactic classification meant proceed only if you have a death wish or a deeply ironic sense of humor. The Council moved on. New threats emerged. New crises erupted. There were wormhole tax disputes, plasma embargoes, and a species on Nebula 12 that discovered religion through synchronized swimming. But Glan remained. He lived in a quiet wing of the Strategic Recovery Division. His room had no sharp edges, no hard questions, and by explicit request, no karaoke machines. No one visited him unless absolutely necessary, not out of fear, but out of the uneasy sense that if they stayed too long, they'd begin craving deep-fried novelty items and humming theme songs from sitcoms they'd never seen. The duck became something of a legend. It was placed inside a transparent stasis case, where it floated gently, eternally preserved in whatever strange, squeak-infused aura it had acquired. Scientists studied it, engineers scanned it, diplomats avoided it entirely. One day, a group of interns dared each other to press the stasis case button. They did. It squeaked. 4 of them quit immediately. One applied for relocation to a mining colony on a planet with no atmosphere, claiming he needed silence. And then, weeks later, something changed. A signal from Earth, not a weapon, not a threat, a broadcast, low frequency, simple, analog, music. It crackled through space, distorted and incomplete but unmistakable, a remix of Achy Breaky Heart, layered with whale sounds and what sounded suspiciously like a kazoo solo. Command ignored it. Of course they did. But Glan didn't. He stood in the doorway of his room for the first time in months, listened, narrowed his eyes, and muttered, "They're evolving." He requested access to the full transmission log, was denied, requested again, denied again. So he broke in. With a spoon, security footage showed him casually dismantling a reinforced door using only cutlery and grim resolve. It took 7 minutes. The guards didn't stop him. One of them actually handed him a cup of coffee and said, "Godspeed." He downloaded the Earth broadcasts, watched them all. Thousands of hours of what humans proudly called content. Glan stared at a man reviewing 17 types of ranch dressing, at 2 women arguing over whether a haunted toaster had the right to vote, at a game show where contestants had to guess if an object was cake. He watched, and then he laughed. Not the broken laugh of a man on the edge, but a full-bodied, horrible, glorious snort-wheeze choke of a laugh that echoed down the corridor and made a general drop his tablet. "Sir," said an officer, knocking on his door later that evening. "Are you all right?" Glan turned around, eyes wide with knowledge no sane being should possess. "They're not dangerous," he said. "They're insidious." The council held an emergency session. "We thought they were primitive," Glan said, "but they're post-irony. They've surpassed chaos. They've weaponized confusion. I watched one of them prank their grandmother by replacing every object in her home with spaghetti." "That's not possible," someone whispered. "It wasn't even cooked spaghetti." Gasps. He stepped forward, duck under arm, and placed a data chip on the table. "You wanted to know what happened on Earth? Here it is, raw footage, no filters, no context. Just humanity, uncut." No one moved. "May the stars help you." He walked out. He didn't look back. The room remained silent for a long time. Eventually, the youngest member of the council, who hadn't spoken all day, leaned forward and asked, "Should we retaliate?" "No," said the chair softly, watching the duck's reflection on the table surface. "We should hope they never leave that planet." But of course it was already too late. A week later, a freighter on a routine supply run to the Drelvian sector picked up a hitchhiker, human, wearing flip-flops, asking where the nearest karaoke bar was. Glarn was right. They had already begun.